fantasy football. Why the science of fantasy football? Well, we get a meteorologist and a biologist together. They're, of course, going to use the scientific method to come up with a better strategy in fantasy football. And why is it a better strategy? It's because we're handling numbers in a smarter way, and fantasy football is a numbers game. Joining me like he does each and every week here on the science of fantasy football. After all, he is the fantasy professor and a real professor. It's John Bush. John, welcome back.
Hey, Dennis, it's the end of July, 7/26. You and I are going to meet physically at the expo. Looking forward to just seeing how all that's going to end up here. I'm curious. Hopefully, it's not a bad waste because Dennis and I will be busy doing our thing, so it won't be a waste. And I'm going to go get the Hall of Fame. Looking forward to that, Dennis. And uh, it's just, it's that good time. I am now transitioned out of best ball, out of 32 leagues. I've got one left, and I have moved into $35 FFPC slow draft. And I wanted just to start doing one or two, even though my data says this is not my time of the year yet. It's about mid-August is when I'm going to jump in hand over fist and do as many as I can. But anyway, I needed to see the latest ADPs. And Dennis and I today are going to talk about some Vegas information data that we will chew on a little bit and give you guys a new or maybe a different perspective. There's been a few other articles that I've seen over the years. It's like interesting idea, but let's move this forward. Let's make this part of a test. And I still haven't seen that yet. But anyway, that's where I'm at. And I'm sure Dennis is excited about the expo as well.
Yeah, it was fun last year. I will honestly tell you, I had a lot better time than I expected to have at the
Mhm.
Fantasy Football Expo. Yes, there are some aspects to the fantasy football world like life where you get a little cliquish and it's, the cool kids hanging out together. But what was fun, Professor, is that
Yeah.
I could talk to one of the newer rising stars in fantasy football, like Hutchinson Brown, who at the time I met him was only 17 years old.
Wow.
And the kid's brilliant. He was there with his father, and he's such a wonderful young man, a very knowledgeable, smart young man when it comes to fantasy football, and very good at communicating, which is a strength. If
Yes.
you're trying to tell people how to do anything in fantasy football, being persuasive, being able to communicate is a good thing. And I also got to meet some of the OGs, Jim Coventry, and briefly Bob Harris and Bob Lung. These were guys that I have followed for years, and getting to talk to some Hall of Famers in fantasy football, guys that have been doing this forever. Um, that was a thrill, and it was so cool. And I've actually stayed in touch with a few of the people that I met at the expo as well. Got to meet Scott Fish from the Fish Bowl, and it's nice of a person as you could imagine.
And he let you play again this year,
He let me
man.
play again this year. It's amazing.
Even though he met you, okay, that's good,
Yeah,
Dennis. You're getting
but
better at your people skills.
there were fun people and there were fun moments because there were some people that came up
Yeah,
that just wanted to meet me, and I'm like, well, this is kind of weird, from
yeah,
my Twitter banters and stuff. But
yeah,
a lot of fun when you get all of these crazy people together
yeah.
in the same place. It is kind of a kick when you get to meet the famous and the not so famous and everything in between. It was a lot of fun. So I think you'll enjoy it this
Good.
year, and it'll be good having a partner in crime there
Yep.
uh, to walk around with as well, and to
Nice.
meet meet a lot of folks that are like-minded. There's a lot of data-driven people.
I like
There,
it.
there's a lot of people that are just there to make a lot of noise in fantasy football, just as they are on fantasy football Twitter. And there's nothing wrong with that either. There's some unique personalities that all come together for a love of fantasy football, and that's what it's all about.
It's all
Well,
good.
well, Professor, I got a gripe
Oh
this week.
no, Dennis.
You know,
Dennis.
it's been a while since I've
Yeah.
had a real honest to goodness gripe, but
Okay.
I've got a
Okay.
gripe.
Go ahead.
Ready?
I'm ready. Whew.
It's the single data point concept.
Yeah.
It's the people that go out of their way to find one stat that shows that a particular player was good at doing something, and they apply that stat to the rookies this year, assuming instantly, because this stat from college matched this player's profile in college, that this rookie will therefore be as great as this great player. But what they fail to show you in such analysis is that if you looked at the entire population of other players that met that criteria, you end up with 20 busts for every hit. Yet they don't show you that. It's like the little, the 3-ball game, they're showing you the ball when they want you to see it. And then when you go to pick it, it's never there. That's what ends up happening if you follow a single data point approach. That's true in fantasy football. I got into it with a guy about weather forecasting because he was showing one model out of 7 that were indicating the development of a tropical storm. And I pointed out, even if this verifies the way this model is saying, other than heavy rain, this is a nothing burger because it was barely a low pressure system. It was like 1,005 millibars, which is nothing for a tropical storm. And I just said, first of all, that's a single model of 7. And the likelihood of that storm developing into something more significant than what this one outlier model is saying is so minuscule that there is no need to scare people, except for, hey, if your area can't take heavy rain, you're probably going to get heavy rain out of this. But you would get that whether it was just a weak low that never made tropical storm strength or not. The wind was going to be under 50 miles an hour, no matter how this all plays out. I just pointed out this single data point analysis is worthless. You're scaring people along the coast for no reason. And again, I stressed, if they can't take a lot of rain because they've had so much rain, yes, that's something to worry about. But to basically say another Burl is coming for the Gulf Coast states was irresponsible, in my opinion. But I see the same things in fantasy football every day too. The single data point concept, it's going to lead you astray more than it's going to give you winners.
I agree. We call that the old giraffe sticks up out of the weeds. And what does that mean? Lots of things it could mean. The only thing as a science of fantasy football advocate, Dennis, if somebody took a giraffe and said, let's make this a hypothesis and let's test all the data points previous and then maybe even in the future and do some stats and work it up and that kind of thing. Or maybe even like if you don't have that patience, well, why don't you beta test and, where you make that person a priority or not, and just how did it all work out? In other words, if the best case a giraffe should do is give you a hypothesis to test and move, go to a process that we try to apply. And that kind of leads to, and mine's not a graph, it's an editorial. This is just, and it doesn't mean because we do things differently that, we know everything. It's just using the scientific method as a guide. We are currently doing 5 different beta tests for different weekly metrics and trying to use that to apply to our fantasy drafts this year. And we already have tested one, Dennis's MVP. You can go check out his multi articles on that and whatnot. Maybe I put that out there. I'm sure I did. This may have been last year, Dennis. But anyway, the early results suggest your MVP is good news for picking quarterbacks and RBs, and the same as the public in tight ends and wide receivers. And folks say, well, you mean it wasn't best on everything? Well, look, if I can just find one little lever in quarterbacks or running backs, that's an advantage. And that's what we're trying to do with testing all 5 this year. This is the first time we've done that. And I was mowing my yard out here. It was a cool day today, actually. It was all cloudy and out here in Arkansas. And I was out on my 3 acres, my John Deere tractor, and thinking, I was already thinking, how am I going to test come February these 5 different metrics? I'm going to use principal component analysis to look at the overlap. In other words, if 2 or 3 of them are saying the same thing, it's probably not to our advantage to spend a lot of time on doing 3 different ways of doing the same thing, right?
Yes.
And we don't know that. See, that's the thing. Or maybe it is this one's 10% of the information, these other 3 are 30%, so it's 90, and then the 10, and maybe a 5th one is just out. That, in other words, we can construct for next year, based on this year's test, another tweak to how we might then average out the system. This year, I'm just taking all 5. I've scaled them on a scale of 0 to 100 and just doing a quick and dirty average, and we'll see how all that plays. And my editorial is I don't see that in any of the sites that I notice. If people are proposing rankings or whatnot, I don't see how that in any kind of formalized way. They may put a tweet, yeah, I really kicked butt last year. Well, how did you test that? What's your definition? Here we get definition to what's your definition of success or failure? In other words, I never see that, because when I go through ours, when I looked at MVP, I went through and actually I remember talking to Dennis, look what this shows. And yeah, I see it. And we provide as much clarity as we can. Remember, the caveat is we only have 17, 18 data points, so that we're coming in fantasy with a lot of our multi arms tied behind our back here. I don't know how we're doing as good as we're doing, Dennis, because in real world, can you imagine in weather? Yeah, I'm going to use 18 data points and I'm going to be a hurricane forecaster. Is that okay? They would laugh you out. They would probably put you in jail for negligence if you use just 18 data points. I mean, Dennis tipped me on to the spaghetti models, and you look and there's it's more than 7, Dennis, that I saw. Look
Oh,
like
yeah.
a bunch more. And I mean, that's the state of the art, folks. When you look and you realize forecasting and you see what the state of the art is, the Hurricane Center Miami is the best that we have on the planet. And this is still what they're doing. They'll give you the cone of uncertainty, right? Kind of like You put that around your dog, the cone of shame. What's the cone of uncertainty? And it does not get narrower to the, yep, it's going to hit this little town right here in Texas. By the time it's said and done, depending on how far out they're going, that damn thing could be between losing, New Orleans and, Galveston, or even, deeper still. And that's just a way of forecasting. And I don't see that, Dennis. And it's, I understand. What I do see is there'll be new people coming in and they'll bring something and they'll say something. And it's like, I would rather you figured out what, the experts you had last year, show us the metrics, show us, what's going on, and show us the hypothesis you're testing this year. What are you doing this year? In other words, if you're paying for a place that we got our rankings and you hadn't changed in the last 20 years, folks, you're wasting your money, because what happened 2 years ago may not be as relevant. And I assure you that Dennis and I, let's just say my beta test this year finds that two of our metrics are really great, the others suck. It doesn't mean we stop. It doesn't mean we declare a victory. All that means is we double down, triple down our focus and tweak that even more. The day that I tell you, Dennis, we're done, Dennis, we figured it out, I'm dead at that point, or I'm in the nursing home, fighting Biden for his ice cream. And because, two old guys in wheelchairs sword fighting with ice cream cones. So I'll never stop unless, I'm just out to the farm, and then I won't know that I'm out to the farm, so it doesn't matter. But anyway, that's my editorial, Dennis. What you think?
Yeah, absolutely right on the money. I think the reason you don't see that is I think there are a lot of people in the fantasy football space who could not, if you tried to pin them down to give you a specific strategy that they use to figure out that Jordan Love is better or worse than Brock Purdy, they could not tell you a specific way that they could test that, or they could look at it. And they might also look at things in a very narrow way, where they're only saying, okay, this guy is QB8, this guy is QB10, and that is it. When the reality is that every player has a range of logical outcomes. Not all range of outcomes are the same. So a Josh Allen or a Jalen Hurts or a Patrick Mahomes, their upside might be quarterback 1. Their worst case might be quarterback 5 on any given year, versus somebody like a Justin Herbert, who, if you look at his back class, he had an MVP of 140, Professor, back in 2020. That was the second or the third highest MVP total for a quarterback. Mahomes the best at 153, Josh Allen the best at 144, both of those in the 2022 season. 140 is tied for third place since I've been doing this, and that dates back to 2018. So if you look at that, look at the data that way, you could say, Justin Herbert, he might be a quarterback 1, best overall in weekly value, or he could be quarterback 18. He's got a wider variance in where he could finish than other players. But if you looked at only one data point to try to predict the future, your prediction is going to be off, no matter whether you're looking at the best or the worst of Justin Herbert's data points since he came into the league. So there's so much detail that I think gets lost in the fantasy football space. But one area, Professor, that I think we're again here at Science of Fantasy Football are ahead of the game when it comes to other people trying to forecast this game is trying to understand Vegas props and how to utilize those. Last season, I was having great success utilizing some of the Vegas props for decisions on tiebreakers of start or sit decisions in redraft. Professor, the season long props that are out now for quarterbacks showing some interesting data.
Yeah. So just to kind of tell people what we're going to do next week, we're going to have the latest ADPs in what I'm playing the FFPC $35 slow league. We're going to have what the public's saying there. And again, the concept is if you're paying that money, it's a little bit more informed. At least that's the idea. I don't know if that's true because I don't have enough data from other sites to compare it to. But we'll have that. We'll have their season point projections for all the players. I've got those scaled, so it's all good. I'll have our average of our Bush Mendelson metric. It's BMM. I don't know. It sounds like BM. I don't know, Dennis. That may be about where we're at next year. Our BM, you like it, you forgot. Hey, I'm a biologist. I got to laugh. But anyway, our BMM, that means we're really making some bowel movements. And then I'm going to shoehorn in. See, you wasn't ready for that joke.
No,
Vegas. Dennis, it all comes down to it, doesn't it? Enough roughage in your diet, but Dennis, it's time. We can, tell our friends at the expo, well, we'd like to talk longer, but we got to go get a little roughage here, make sure our BMM is the best metric it can be. Dennis, they will vote us out of the club. We will be banned next year if we start that kind of talk.
Post surgery, I can tell you, Professor,
Yeah.
the body goes into some really bad. The body makes some bad decisions after surgery.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, bad decisions. Yeah, it doesn't help that you go down to Taco Bell right after surgery. Hit the burrito special, right? But anyway, I'm going to also use the Vegas metrics that I've for these season future props. And I've calculated, in quotes, calculated Vegas's information and kind of gave us some fantasy points based on it's as good as I can get because they don't have all the props for all the players. And I kind of had to fudge a little bit. And then I scaled that and I used that for the tier system. And I'm recording it again, video, folks. Once we post the podcast, you can also see the visuals here that Dennis and I are looking at. And we have the V is Vegas passing yards, Vegas passing touchdowns predicted for the season. And V/B, that means Vegas and Bush, because the rushing yards, because not Vegas didn't do all the quarterbacks. So I kind of just defaulted to kind of what was going on last year, but in a weekly, assumed everybody survived for 17 weeks. So I threw out the injuries. For instance, Anthony Richardson. I tried to kind of fudge a little best I can do, Dennis. That's all I got. And then rushing TDs, same thing. It's V/B, rushing TDs. Long story short, I get fantasy points and I scaled it 0 to 100. 100's the best. And then I color coded the tiers. Number 1, Josh Allen. The second tier, Hurts and Mahomes. Then we have Jackson, Prescott, very interesting. Jordan Love, very, and Stroud. And just to let you know, Prescott and Love, Dennis, are going way down from
Oh,
some of these
yeah.
other guys. But Vegas would have us believe that they're competitive season long. So I just, and we can talk about all these, but anyway, folks, you can see the hard copy. I'll put all the hard copy out for us here. But Dennis, let's chew on these tiers a little bit and see what you think of all this stuff.
So my first takeaway is I get very excited when I look at this data because in the Scott Fish Bowl, which is a super flex, so I get to start 2 quarterbacks every week, and my quarterbacks are Patrick Mahomes and Dak Prescott. I've
Dennis,
got
Vegas would say, congratulations, you got the top five, 2 of the top 5 by their
yeah,
metrics.
yeah, and anytime you can lock that up, where you have the potential 2 in the top 5 at quarterback in a super flex, you're just printing money. There's no doubt about that. And the interesting thing is Josh Allen lost every single wide receiver that, basically lost almost all of his catches last year from the wide receiver position.
But they still kind of like him pretty good if you include his rushing
Correct.
props and whatnot. So
And I
again,
don't think,
we're doing fantasy points.
and his rushing props are not
8.5.
outrageous. They're
Yeah,
not outrageous. That's half of what he had last year, basically.
yeah, they were being conservative.
Yeah. So I love this. Josh Allen is so here's my take on what I have already determined at quarterback using my metrics. And again, because MVP did really well at quarterback, I'm leaning on the
Professor tested.
Yep,
Yes,
professor
I
tested.
agree with that statement.
So this year, I have 3 elite quarterbacks that are head and shoulders above the rest of the crowd. And that's Hurts, Mahomes, and Allen. They've separated
And
them.
Dennis, look at the scale numbers.
Yes.
190, 90,
Yep.
then
Yep.
78.
And
So your MVP is right on target with Vegas's gap as well.
so a 17-point gap in MVP between my 3rd and my 4th players.
Vegas
Okay.
would call it 22.2.
Yes. So we're picking up on the same thing.
Yep.
If I go another 17 points, that gets me all the way down to basically QB 15.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yes. So if you do not have an elite guy, you don't have one of those top 3 elite guys, you want to get the best value from that next tier, which is pretty broad.
It's 4.
Yeah, exactly. So of those 4, you're going to get one of those guys.
I'm going to get, they are letting Prescott and Love, Dennis, but I kid you not, in the $35 redraft, 8th, 9th round.
Wow.
Which is later than what I found in the best ball. So you asked me the other day,
yes,
ADP best ball over. This year I was flummoxed at what I'm finding so far. It scares me. It's just like, this can't be. So I'm actually in my draft. I was going to think, oh, by the 4th round, certainly 5th or 6th, I'm going to have to take a quarterback. If Dak or Jordan Love will last to the 8th or 9th, I'm just going to be greedy dog and take RBs and WRs, a lot more than I thought I was going to get. I'm feeling too greedy. So I'm looking around. What am I doing wrong? It's kind of like, it looks so good. It's kind of like you pick something up and is there a mousetrap here? What's going to hit my thing? You just can't believe it. And it feels suspicious, Dennis. And I'm very suspicious right now of what I'm doing.
So here's a strategy play that makes a lot of sense to me. Okay.
Yep.
They're going in the 8th and 9th, right?
Yeah, when I pull up yeah, so when I pull up the latest, so in the 8th round, here's 8th round, Burrow, Murray, 9th round, Prescott, Love, right there at 100 and 101, Dennis.
Wow.
Back
Wow.
and to back. So
So,
you'll get one, but you can come back. In other words, theoretically, if you want to, you could pick up a Burrow or a Murray and then swing and get a Prescott or Love if you wanted, or wait
so,
for Purdy in the 10th round.
so here's my strategy play that I'll probably put into play. You knowing this data, because I'm perfectly happy with either Dak Prescott or Jordan Love. Now, they both have some warts on them that could get you concerned about
Well, that's why Vegas
what,
has put them down in the next tier, the 3rd tier.
but they're in that 3rd tier. So what if I just draft running backs and wide receivers for 6 rounds, with the exception of taking one elite tight end somewhere,
You mean
overpay.
like Kelsey?
I'll
Yes.
overpay for a tight
Already
end.
did it. Already did it.
So I overpay for a tight end.
Yeah.
I split the other 5 picks in the first 6 rounds
Yep.
with running backs and wide receivers. So now I've got maybe 3 elite wide receivers, 2 elite wide or running backs. In the 7th and 8th rounds, these guys are going in the 8th and 9th. In the 7th and 8th, I overpay slightly to make sure I lock up Prescott and Love, who have different bye weeks. Now I've got 2 really good quarterbacks that I can play whoever has the best defensive matchup on that particular week. And I've got my starting running backs, I've got my starting wide receivers, and I got an elite tight end to go with a very good quarterback. That would be a tough team to beat in redraft, because I know in the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th rounds that I have running backs and wide receivers that I know are going that late that I can fill out the rest of my roster with. That's a strategy I'm going to be overusing this year. And you notice I didn't specify any specific running backs or wide receivers.
Nope.
I just said I'm going to grab maybe Kelsey. I'm going to grab maybe Laporta at tight end. I'm going to overpay in the 2nd round for one of those guys. And where my draft position is will determine which guy I'm overpaying for slightly. Yeah, I just got Kelsey in an underdog draft with pick 41.
That's just crazy.
4th round. That's crazy. But I know I won't get that lucky. So if I overpay in the 2nd or 3rd round for a tight end, reading the draft, seeing how it's going, depends on my draft position, I can come away with a tight end, one of the elite 3 or 4 top tight ends. And that means either Laporta, Kelsey, McBride are going to be on my roster. I'll have 5 really good wide receivers and running backs mixed together. So I'll have my 2 starting running backs, my 2 starting wide receivers before I take a quarterback. I'll have 1 flex, and then I could fill out my roster with other quality running backs and wide receivers that I like better than the public. That's a strategy, Professor, that I think is going to be a winning one. I don't have the elite of the elite quarterbacks, but I've got 2 very good choices. And I am liking this idea of having 2 choices at quarterback every week to maximize my chance at having an advantage at the quarterback position.
I like that. I'm coming into the 4th round. I took AJ Brown, Kelsey, and 3rd round I thought hard about an RB, but I was looking, and Debo Samuel was there, so I
Ooh, I
decided,
love Debo.
let me, yeah. And so I grabbed him. And the fourth round's coming up. I might be able to get a Mahomes, but I'm debating in the fourth round, do I grab Mahomes and then wait and pick? You know what I'm saying? But then I won't have an RB to round 5. So I'm debating RB, or like if there's an elite, if Mahomes is available. That's going to be my debate, I think is. But Mixon's there, Connor's there, Kamara's there. Those are some that I really like that have opportunity to be a lower level RB1 type that I think you can limp through, if you play them correctly. In fact, I might even do the fourth, fifth round, 2 RBs. I would love to
Yeah.
have 2 of those, 3 or 4. So I hadn't decided how it's going to go. I'm gonna wait to adapt to. I'm 2 picks away because I don't know if Mahomes is even available there. May not be.
It,
Just to let you know that Allen was going in the fourth round, and Mahomes and Hurts were around late fourth, early fifth. Dennis, it's real strange because I just come off best ball, and those guys were going second, third. It's
yes.
like I don't know what to think of all this right now. I'm still a little flummoxed and suspicious of this whole situation. Seems
And
too good.
and here's the thing, Professor.
Yeah.
In best ball, I'm okay with not having an elite tight end. Yep, I would love to have one because that makes your roster build different. But I'll take 3 shots in best ball at the tight end position with guys like Freermuth, Jonnu Smith, Jelani Woods, Noah Fant, even. Like, they're not elite. Nobody's going to confuse them with elite. But usually in best ball drafts, I've been able to get a Kittle affordably and then add 2 more tight ends with some upside. In redraft, I'll overpay every time for the elite tight end. And it looks like I don't have to overpay as much as I was in best ball. It's weird because in best ball, I'll take a chance at tight end because if I've got 3 on the roster, I got 3 chances of scoring a touchdown. Versus
Yeah.
in redraft, I have to make a decision who's in my starting lineup, and I want that decision to be easy. I want it to be a Kelsey or a Laporta or a McBride.
Yeah.
Those are the 3 that I prefer over all others. And then, of course, we've talked about the draft TJ Hawkinson and somebody really good.
Yeah. I
And
can
and
yeah,
and
this is the Vegas opinion of tight ends since you've been talking
yep,
about them. Laporta, Kelsey, 1-2, 198.8
yep,
scaled. Andrews, look at there, 83. Andrews is being the 5th guy.
yep, yep. And I
And
love Mark Andrews.
yeah, that's intriguing to me. Then you have Kincaid. Kittle is thought of higher than the ADP, Dennis. Look
Yeah.
at where Trey McBride, Vegas has an issue with Trey McBride.
And I know the reason that they're doing that is because they believe that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to take away a lot of the opportunities that he had. But I'm looking at it the opposite way. I'm saying Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to open up the field for McBride, and McBride is likely to be the second target guy on that team, just like Andrews is first or second, Kelsey is first and second, Laporta's second on his team, guaranteed. Kittle's the third guy behind Debo and Ayuk. Still good. I'll still take him at where he's going in the draft, but I'm I like McBride this year, and it's mainly because the price tag has been lower. But I'll also take Andrews. Those are the 4 tight ends that I want to leave every draft with this year. If I can't, yeah, I'll take a Dalton Kincaid. I'll take a Kittle. I'll once again, I'll take an Evan Ingram. I'll take a Jake Ferguson. It all depends on if I miss out on that elite guy, then I've got to settle for that next tier. And my next tier is a little broader than Vegas. But you see the difference in those. If you miss on the top 3, according to Vegas, you can wait.
Oh yeah.
There's a
yeah.
glut of 6 or 7 right there that are in that next,
Who
you've got to
tiers?
miss 3 tiers as far as the math goes.
Yeah.
But I would say the difference in points are similar enough that there's actually 7 guys in there, 8 guys that you could say on a weekly basis are fairly even after those top guys. So yeah, this is fascinating data, Professor. I'm loving using the Vegas props because Vegas doesn't want to be that far off of reality when it comes to player.
And so like I said, for our listeners, I will have the hard copies of this data. And like I said, next week, I'm going to scale it all down to positional rank. So you won't have so many numbers. And I'm looking forward to next February when I start figuring out, was Vegas better than the public? Was it worse? Was it the same? How was our metrics? How did they compare to Vegas? So, folks, we have 6 beta tests going. We have 6 different metrics, and we'll compare to the public. And I'm just so this is the first year we've ever had this kind of a beta testing. I think we're getting to the point where we're going to start harvesting some good stuff. And the folks that are listening, I think we're going to get better and better each year, folks. So that and we'll find out. And maybe Vegas sucks. I doubt it. I mean, Vegas is there. If they sucked, it's not like a little shack out there and hell, here, I'll take your bet. Papa right there on the rocking chair taking bets and whatnot. It's grand. It's like Taj Mahal up there. It's a big deal. And that, and by the way, if you want free trip, just say, look, I'm a professional dice player or roulette player, and I'm ready to come spend. I bet you they will, if you say, look, if you'll spend 10,000, we will comp you all damn week. Because, folks, there's no such thing as professional dice players unless you got crooked dice or roulette wheel. I mean, it's the house advantage. They love that kind of stuff. Only with sports and horse racing do you have, and probably poker, you have an opportunity to use thinking, forecasting, game theory. You have an opportunity to beat other folks and the pari-mutuel. So you have an opportunity. I assure you, those slot machines, you can't walk up and do a funny dance and flip around and somehow have an advantage. There's no advantage there. Okay. Or shake the dice a funny way, or get the cocktail waitress to blow on the lucky dice. It don't work, folks. So anyway, I'll have all this, Dennis. But what I did want to show, and I know we could, Dennis, how many hours could we talk this stuff?
Oh, we could go 4
Yeah,
hours a
so
day, no problem.
this, Dennis, what I wanted to do was take a look at 2023 passing yards, and I'm just still on quarterbacks. If everybody play, I have if played the complete season. So I try to throw out in like Anthony Richardson. So I took his, weekly yardage and multiply it by 17, that kind of thing, right? So I've got that data as a group, and I did basically the same number of quarterbacks, pretty close, to what Vegas did. I think the top 31 or 32. And then Vegas passing yard predictions. I did the old box and whisker, and here it is. And some things that I noticed, and I'll let Dennis talk about, is Vegas is floor, ceiling are inside the real data from last year, which is interesting. And the box is still a little bit contracted from the top, but not on the bottom. And so I don't know enough about setting odds and how Vegas makes money. I really wish I had a few years to study that and talk to these odds folks. And it may be AI now, but somebody had to figure it out at some point, these AI algorithms and stuff, Dennis. I wish, they're not going to share it with me because, that's how they make their money. But I'm hoping that over the years, I'm going to be able to tweak Vegas's and get a little bit better at trying to, I'm just trying to understand what this really means. And I'm still struggling with it a little bit because Vegas is trying to balance the books and make money either way versus the actual real data. So I'll stop here and Dennis, what do you think when I show you this data from the real world versus Vegas's 2024 predictions? And they're closer than I would have thought. Vegas is not just off in another planet somewhere. They're right spot on with what reality is. They know what happened last year.
So here's the surprising thing to me when I look at this data is I look at the difference in spreads at different places along this chart. So for instance, if you look at the top whisker for Vegas versus the top whisker of reality, that's about a 300-yard difference.
350.
305. Yeah.
350.
So
in reality, it's 450. I mean,
well,
so no, 550.
I'm comparing the top whisker of Vegas to last year's top whisker.
And if you subtract it, it's 550 versus 350.
Yeah. So I'm looking at that difference and I'm saying two things. I'm saying, first of all, that's a pretty wide spread on the whiskers. If I look at the top of the box and compare, it's 4,105 to 4,000. That's a lot tighter than it was for the top whiskers.
Yes.
I look at the bottom of the box.
Pretty damn close.
It's 3173, 3201. Those are they're statistically identical. Yet I look at the bottom whisker, and once again, we've got a huge spread.
Yeah.
But notice the spread is in the same direction for both extremes. Both extremes of Vegas are tighter to the box than reality last year. But here's the thing. Look at where the median ends up. The median's statistically the same. That's over a 17-game season. That's a difference of 57
that's not
yards.
A difference. Yeah,
that's 57 yards over 17 games.
Yeah,
we're talking.
That's not
talking 4 yards a game.
No, it's not different.
So Vegas is saying, okay, we're going to put odds that are right up the middle because my goal is to get they want even action across the spread. The odds of going over or under will take the rake. So Vegas just wants lots of action. That's all they want. They want to generate action because the probabilities to the plus and minus are negligible. But I will guarantee you that Vegas has done the work and they know the tendencies of bettors. And they realize we're going to get more action. We're going to set the line and we're going to try to get more action to the plus side because we know because of injuries, the minus side cashes more often. And that's how they end up raking in the money every year.
But for us, how should we play it? Should we go
So
the bottom side?
I'm not sure
See,
what
that's what I hadn't figured out is how do
I'm
I
not.
use this?
Yeah, I'm not sure how you bet the props just based on this. But what I'll
Yeah,
tell you, Professor,
yeah,
is I'm going to factor in what Vegas thinks about a player in my handicapping for 2024 because Vegas needs to be close based on a 17 game average.
yep.
Where they're going to make their money to the minus side is because if they get enough people going the plus side on a bet and the injuries happen, they're going to cash more of their bets. They're going to make more money the more players get injured because they have set the line in such a way that they're going to generate even action plus or minus.
And this is
So,
the touchdowns as well. I got lots of data, Dennis, more
oh
than
yeah,
and it just excites me because I'm curious what you think when you look at this. It's different than the passing. Passing yards are almost laid on top of each other.
yes.
Touchdowns look completely different. Are they
And
over? Are they trying to trick you with touchdowns? You see, they're 26 to 18. Is that too aggressive? Because in reality, it's more like 24 to 8. In other words, there's a lot of failures on quarterbacks, a lot of variation in actually scoring touchdown. And Vegas is not going to give you a lot of that. They're going to
no,
give you 18. So you're going to have to, are they hoping you're too aggressive? Like, man, my quarterback's going to really romp and stomp with passing TDs this year.
passing TDs, even for the great players, the best players in the business. Look at Josh Allen's passing touchdowns,
Yeah,
and he's got a huge spread between high and low.
yeah.
You look at his total touchdowns scored, and that's a lot tighter distribution. So when it comes to passing TDs, Vegas is saying beat us on the upside. We'll give you a number that looks tantalizing,
But it's not. It
but it's
looks,
not because they know what the reality is. They know that 20 is still a great 20 passing touchdowns, which if you ask anybody on fantasy football Twitter, will
yeah.
you be happy if your quarterback throws for exactly 20 touchdowns this year? And you'll get everybody saying no. You'll get 80% of the people on
They're
fantasy football
wrong
Twitter.
because that's probably the
It's
expected.
it's
In
above
fact, last
median.
year it was about 15 or 16, Dennis.
It's above median. Yet I guarantee that 70 to 80%. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this as a poll today and see what the results are. We'll report this next week.
Okay.
But I
But
guarantee.
I'm saying in reality, Dennis,
Oh
if
yeah.
if the 2023 touchdowns, the median 15.
Yes.
So if people were happy at 20 and not happy at 20, they're not going to be happy at 15 in reality.
Yes.
Vegas is trying to, I guess, when they say we'll give you 22 on the median, when we know reality it's 15. So they're already got you by 7 right there.
Oh,
That,
that's huge.
that looks like a bad bet. That was my take. In other words, if you're asking me passing yards or touchdowns, I'm going to look at the passing yards for my conservative play on props. Am
And
I?
there's
I mean, I don't know a Vegas expert, folks. We'd love to if somebody makes a living. And I mean, I know you don't want to tell. You could use a fake name, just get a burner account. I would
deep
love to
throat.
hear you discuss what I'm, my box and whisker. I would love to be educated on this.
Vegas deep throat. You have a place to come on. We'll even
We,
fake your voice.
yeah, yeah,
We'll put your voice through a voice synthesizer.
yeah,
But so here's the thing that Vegas is looking at.
yeah.
Okay, because your data, of course, it was your data. Your data was actual. 20 performance. It was not equated to a 17 game schedule.
No, I
right?
think I tweaked it to 17, Dennis.
Okay. Well, that's even more important then, because Vegas is now saying we know the tendencies are for people to think high when it comes to touchdown output. So now they've got two ways of cashing their bet.
If Vegas was fair, they would lower that closer to 16 or 15.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Okay.
But their move is to get action. They know where they can get the action. But here's why I think it's perfectly fine to compare players using this data for fantasy football. Any skew versus reality is equal across the board. There might be a few players like Mahomes and Allen that skew to the high side, but that's already going to be captured in the data. We don't care about that. But Vegas has two ways of beating you now. Yeah. If your player plays the full 17 seasons and has a typical season, they're going to beat you because you're going to be under that 22 most likely, because that's a 7 touchdown spread. That's huge. Or your guy's going to get hurt and he's going to fail to make that number. So they got two ways to cash their bet, Professor. That's brilliant.
For them.
Oh, yeah. Their
not
ideas,
for us.
Their goal is to make money. But here's the thing.
My goal is to make money. So we're clashing on our approaches here.
But we know this data, Professor. So we should be able to find and exploit.
Yeah. Well,
those minus.
We haven't done any of this. Dennis, this is my first year to start even thinking this way.
And I'm intrigued to take a shot at some unders, because the similar thing applies. If we bet under and our player that we picked only plays 7 or 8 games this year, we've cashed our bet.
Yeah.
Or if he just has a typical season and doesn't have an out of this world season, he's going to fall below because there's a 7 touchdown bias to the high side for the Vegas lines. We know that. If we're above that median, if the player we're betting against is above that median, according to Vegas, we've got two ways of cashing that bet now. So I'm interested to look at some of these below forecasts, these minus forecasts, these under bets, and see if we can exploit some of those.
I'm intrigued here. Running backs, this is top tiers here. CMC, Henry, number 2. That is surprising to a lot of people.
And they're only giving Derrick Henry 10.5 touchdowns.
Same as CMC. So
10.5.
Yeah. And what do you think?
Whew. I have been very bullish on Derrick Henry this year.
Vegas is too.
Because here's the thing, professors, I don't care about injuries. The way I play fantasy football, I don't care about injuries.
I know it's a weekly game.
I want 10 games.
Yeah.
Give me 10 to 12 games of CMC getting full volume. Give me 10 to 12 games of Derrick Henry getting full volume. I'll figure out something to do the other 4 or 5 games. So this is intriguing to me. I've been very bullish on Derrick Henry because he's on a much better offense this year. There's no question about that. And I think Baltimore wants to keep Lamar Jackson healthy. So I think there are going to be fewer opportunities for Jackson to be running the ball in at the goal line when they've got a guy like Derrick Henry who can plow that ball across the goal line for you. So looking at these stats, seeing that he's number 2, yet looking at,
I mean, if I look at ADP, I think he is going, let's see, Henry is going in the 2nd round, 20th pick overall, looking at everybody.
that's not a bad ranking for him. Like that's a legitimate ranking for him.
Right.
He was going in Scott Fishbowl. He was going after guys like Travis Etienne. He was going after Kyron Williams.
Vegas doesn't see it that way.
He was going after Jonathan Taylor.
Vegas says this. Kyron Williams is up there. Third.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then Taylor, Brees Hall, fourth.
And Kyron Williams is a classic case this year of a guy that I will bet on at ADP, but with one caveat.
Yeah.
If I draft Kyron Williams, I'm backing him up with Blake Corum.
Okay.
And it's not because I think Blake Corum's going to win the job. It's just that I think Kyron Williams will be rested for a few games. So why not wrap up the entire backfield? If you like one, take both, because you're going to get them both at a good value. With Derrick Henry, it's a little tougher because I don't know who the backup is going to be with Baltimore yet.
And Bijan is lower than people like.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
That is interesting, because if I were to put my faith, let's say
it's the touchdowns that are his weakness.
And that makes sense in a way, but all these touchdown props are really low. Like these forecasts for touchdowns are very low. Somebody's going to pop up and get a 15 touchdown season. And if I were to put money on who that was most likely to be, it'd be McCaffrey, Henry, and maybe Saquon Barkley as number 3. But I'd like Bijan Robinson in that discussion for double-digit touchdowns. But he's clearly, like, he's kind of my third running back this year behind McCaffrey and Hall. It's Bijan. So the guys I've got rated above Bijan are definitely above Bijan even in these rankings. Christian McCaffrey's the unicorn. He is in a tier of his own. There's no question about that. With Bijan, there's some reason to be questioning about him because we've only seen him for 1 year. We don't know what his true upside is. And so having him in this 5th tier with Jacobs, Barkley, ATN, and Gibbs is interesting because this year I have 4 guys who I think are first round safe in fantasy football at the running back position. It's McCaffrey, Brees Hall, then Bijan Robinson, and maybe Gibbs as the 4th. And I say maybe because it would depend on when I get Gibbs, what is my next move going to be? What wide receivers are still available when I'm put at the decision point of picking Gibbs? There might be a wide receiver I like more, but those are my 4 running backs. And Vegas is telling me I'm wrong on 3 of them because they're not even in that top 2 tiers. So that is interesting data to me and makes me a little bit concerned. And maybe I'll go the safer route and take wide receivers in the first round, unless Brees Hall falls to me. Obviously, if I'm picking number 1, I'm picking McCaffrey. If I'm picking number 2 and McCaffrey's still there, I'm picking him. I'm picking McCaffrey as my top guy. I don't care about injury worries. I don't care about guys don't repeat as RB1. I'm taking the unicorn, and I'll deal with anything else that happens after that.
David Montgomery was interesting. His yards were not as strong, but his touchdowns, 8.5 being that far down. So if you factor all that in, he works into the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tier with Pacheco, Walker, and Mixon with his touchdown potential. Is that real?
Is it real? Well, look at what he's done in his career, Professor.
Yeah.
Here's his touchdown scored
Yeah.
the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Hit 13 last year, 6,
Yeah.
7,
Uh-huh.
11,
Yeah.
and 7.
So
So
8.5 is not outrageous.
no,
Aggressive.
that's a pretty accurate number for a guy that had 13 the year before. So even if he loses 30%,
And they got him next to Pacheco with 6.5. So they're saying Pacheco gets more yards, but he gets less touchdowns. I mean, I could argue you've got a lot of mouths to feed there with
yes.
Kelsey and maybe Hollywood and some of these other cats. I'm curious what you think about that. Compare those two.
Well, we're looking at rushing yards for Pacheco. We're not
Is
looking
much
at
superior.
total yards. And Pacheco has no competition at running back. Here's how weak the competition is for backup running back. Andy Reid is working Kadarius Toney
Ooh.
as the backup running back in a Jerick McKinnon type role.
So Hilaire's not in the mix? Are they off
Hilaire,
him?
Hilaire is signed to a cheap contract, and he will be the backup if something happened to Pacheco. Pacheco has no competition for touches, with the exception being they might use Kadarius Toney
Mm-hmm.
as
Third
the
down or something?
as the new passing down, Jerick McKinney. Now or McKinnon. Now here's the thing: Jerick McKinnon was really good at picking up the blitzing running or linebacker when they did decide to put pressure on and he couldn't get out of the backfield.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure Toney is going to be quite as tough when it comes to dealing with blitzing linebackers. So that experiment might not work out, and we might see more of Pacheco in the backfield on passing downs. But the key is no competition for rushing. He is going to be the man. I would expect him to be over 1,000 yards easy. So the 900 prop is set at a pretty low bar. I think Pacheco's upside is 1,200 yards this year.
The Miami duo is a split backfield. Vegas thinks that, but Pittsburgh, Harris and Warren is not. Vegas would argue, nope, it's Harris to for the win, but they can't pick Mostert and A-Chain. So
I think
that's a tale of two teams there. But I think people were, I know in best ball, I remember Warren and Harris were almost on top of each other. They were closer than I thought they should be. I agree with Vegas here.
And
if that's my choice, yeah.
A-Chain was going way earlier than Mostert in drafts.
Vegas says don't do it.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I like Devon A-Chain as a player, but his fantasy football value is lousy this year. He was being drafted a lot closer to his ceiling, his absolute ceiling, than anything else. And Mostert was a bargain. And they're forecasting 8.5 touchdowns for Mostert, which is half of what he had last year. So,
and notice somebody missing, Kamara, who you and I both love. He's Vegas. We're talking Dennis there, Swift. I mean, Kamara's way down. They are really down on Kamara. Look at Warren right there next to Pittsburgh guy, and Javonte Williams is down there. I'm curious how there's a lot of questions because I think you and I like Swift, Stevenson, Kamara, and those Vegas is not. They're not strong on them. I just showed you page 1.
Yeah, and I like Brian Robinson, who's also on the second page.
Yeah.
Those are guys I like a lot, and Yeah, it's very interesting. And then you see Jonathan Brooks popping up, but you don't see Shuba
No,
Hubbard anywhere.
no.
It's very curious because I think some of these backfields are a bit tighter than they might seem. And there's some that are more lopsided than they might seem. I don't understand the Alvin Kamara hate.
I
When you
mean,
look,
Vegas hates him. They
oh
all
yeah,
hate him.
yeah, they really do. And you look at him and I'm being pretty conservative on my forecast for Kamara because his age and everything else. And I do think that there's a very talented player there, waiting to take some reps in is Kendra Miller. But you know, I had Kamara at 20th, and I thought that was low in my MVP forecast this year. But the gap between him and like Stevenson and other players, and even the gap to Kyron Williams is not that great. So there's guys that I really like, not so much because of where I think they're going to score, but where they are in the ADP. And Stevenson, Kamara, Swift, and Robinson are four guys that I like their value. ADP wise, I think people are sleeping on them. It doesn't mean I think they're going to be top 10, but I think they're going to be top 20. And if I can set up my running back core with a bunch of top 20 guys and I didn't take them in the top 20, I'm looking pretty good. And that's kind of what you can do with those four players.
Okay, wide receiver. I know people getting tired of hearing you and I run our mouth. And folks, I'm skipping over some things, and we'll have, if I get a chance, I'll do some video lessons, just a little bit more detail, going through all the data a little bit. But here we go with wide receivers. Hill and Lamb. Vegas says you pick them on. One of them is going to be number one. One of them won't. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I got CD Lamb a step ahead of everybody this year. But a
Vegas
guy
says
that,
Hill is right there with them. And
yeah,
look at the gap, Dennis.
yeah, yeah, Hill should be there with them. He's pretty close. But a guy that I like, who I think is every bit as good as
Yeah.
CD Lamb and Tyreek Hill
I know who it
is the
is.
Sun God. I'm on
Yeah, I
Ross
know
St.
who
Brown.
it is. Yeah. And so Chase, Sun God, Brown, Jefferson, they're second tier. And then
Yeah.
look at the drop. Garrett Wilson, Evans, Puka. They're hating on Puka this year
Well,
compared to his spectacularness last year. He's in the third tier.
well, the whole thing is
Mhm.
is look at where they got Cooper Cup. They got him two more tiers down, but that's still
Sure
top
do.
20.
Yeah.
It's very hard to sustain a top 5 with another top 20 wide receiver, especially on a team that doesn't pass
Yeah.
at a higher frequency. Like you could get a Jalen Waddle and a Tyreek Hill. You can have a top 5 guy and a top 20 guy because you're throwing the ball so many times. But it's tough to get both Puka and Cooper Cup to verify even against their Vegas numbers. That will be hard. Somebody's going to miss their projection, uh, if you look at it that way, and more likely that it's Cooper Cup missing and maybe missing on the touchdown side. Remember, he was never a big touchdown guy, except for those 1 or 2 years
I
with
remember
Stafford.
more of a possession,
He was a possession guy.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Um, but if you look at the scaled numbers after about Jefferson, 73 to 70, maybe, but after Marvin Harrison, 63, and then way down
yeah.
is 50. So you get a lot right in here, even though I did try to split them, Dennis. It's a lot of the sameness right in here. And Vegas is a lot of the sameness. If you'll look at the numbers from about 950 to 1050 and touchdown 6.5, 5.5. That's it. So for the next, I don't know, what is that, 15 or so, they're all kind of about the same. I don't know if Vegas figures, if we stack them together, there's going to be enough losers in here that will balance the winners. Again, folks, I don't know what all this means yet. Just be aware we are not, in blood signing off on any of this. This is just for us to consider what our metrics are saying, what the ADP. This is a thinking device that's what in science you got to have things to compare, reference class forecasting, and that's what I don't see anybody else doing. And yeah, they'll talk about ADP, but it's just kind of almost, they feel like, yeah, I guess I better throw that out to make sure people are awake out there. It just doesn't feel real. They don't feel like they're searching, Dennis. They're digging in there for those special nuggets of data. I just don't see their claws they don't have claws, Dennis. They've been defanged and declawed, and you and I are sharp, and you know they. If you find us at the expo, we may not look at, but just we're like the Wolverines of fantasy football. We're just in our cage, chewing and gnawing on this data and frothing at the mouth, and we're ready to pop out come September and crush your hopes and leagues that you had the bad fortune to be with, because we're going to crush you one way or the other in free agency or something. You will get spanked, right? So, and no, I'm not telling you what leagues I'm in, because I don't need no yo-hos in there. But I'm just saying, I'm a barracuda and I'm in the weeds, and you'll never know till you stick your hand a little too close. Like, wow, I just lost a few fingers. Every year I'm gonna gnaw a little bit more on your fingers. So you're saying, well, what are you gonna do for me? I'm gonna show you the process to make you lean and hungry too, Dennis. That's what we're doing to our listeners. We're turning them from little bunnies, little fluffy, happy bunnies, to vicious Wolverines in fantasy football. That's what I want to do. I want a Wolverine army, right? If you remember Red Dog, was it?
Oh yeah,
Red Dog. Wolverines, right? Wasn't it Red Dog?
Yeah, Red Dawn. Yep.
Yeah, Wolverines forever. That's what I want to be. Anyway, that's enough.
And here's the thing, Professor, is we're no smarter than the above median guys in fantasy football. There's a lot of very smart folks out there. But with experience comes wisdom if you're open-minded enough to actually change and to understand what data means. And our strength is that we are not going to fall in love with a player. We're going to fall in love with their stats. So we don't care how they get there. All we care about is that this guy produces. And so I'm going to factor this Vegas data in, because I've never seen a Vegas sports book get smaller.
Yeah.
I've never seen a casino contract. I saw Trump bankrupt one, but that was more of a case of other things they were doing, not on the gaming floor. But the whole key is these people that work at the sports book setting lines have got the experience. It's not just their 10 years of experience. They've got 60 years of data that they can draw upon to come up with the right lines, and they understand the psychology of the player. We don't have to worry about the psychology of the player. All we got to do is look at these lines, and I'll guarantee that, yes, they've tweaked the lines a little higher for Tyreek and for CeeDee Lamb because they know that there will be enough action there. But the distribution of touchdowns,
Look at this, Dennis.
it is pretty amazing
Look,
when
look
it
at
comes
the.
to,
I
yeah,
thought I was surprised. I was been saving this one. You
yeah,
remember what the quarterback passing
oh,
touchdown?
yeah,
Look at this. You talk about a tight box.
yes. And
Vegas is not giving you it from 5.5 to 4.5 for good or for bad. 50% of their props are all right there.
and and that makes sense because if you look at touchdown distribution,
Yeah.
there's
Boy, it's tight.
there's a couple of unicorns, but even the unicorns don't repeat from one year to the next. It's they're even the unicorns when it comes to touchdowns, there's more variability on the stats in touchdowns than there are for receptions and yards gained.
This is very tight, Dennis. And again, I'm trying to think, how is that, folks? If it acts like I don't know what's going on, because I don't. I'm seeing this and I'm trying to make sense of it. I've never played props, and so you can hang around with Dennis. We're going to try to learn ourselves, and you can come along for the ride to try to understand this.
But this chart on what really happened last year versus predicted TDs is so bizarre that
isn't it bizarre?
But look how tight the entire, like, most of the population last year was between 3 and 7 touchdowns.
Yes.
Which is why I don't even care so much about touchdowns. I care about volume. I care about how many receptions.
Well, if you look at the yards, it's a little bit broader, but still tight. In other words, it's a little tight, but look at the bottom whisker for prop versus what really happened with the same number. Now, see that I took the end of the season top 30 something or whatever, 45, whatever it was that Vegas did. So that they may be propping on players that don't even make that. If that explains the bottom whisker, maybe some, popular rookies or, kind of almost laying some bait for you to get the big surprise when it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I don't know.
JSN last year for Seattle. I guarantee his prop, he wasn't even halfway there. Probably. We weren't looking at props last year because we each year, Professor, we discover new pieces of data that are worthy of study.
Yes.
And this data is worthy of study, but look at the touchdowns, look at the reception yards.
Yep.
That spread, plus or minus from the median.
Yeah.
It is basically, we're talking 20%.
Yeah.
Plus or minus from the median. If you look at the touchdowns.
Oh yeah.
That touchdowns is like
nothing.
There's nothing.
There's nothing. There's no
nothing.
Slack. There's no slack.
There is
no box. Yeah.
There's a spread of 1.
Yeah.
1 touchdown spread. So
that is weird.
You're deciding over 5 or under 5 is basically
I think that's the trick. Yeah.
And that is going to take some data analysis.
I don't know what that means yet, Dennis. I mean, I'm afraid it will. I'm gonna get a little too perky and happy, and I don't want to be. I don't want to lose my money. I don't want to be a fool, Dennis. I refuse to be a fool, and so I may just be very cautious this year.
But here's an interesting thing, Professor.
Yeah.
Look at where they come together. You're guessing plus or minus 5 for touchdowns. That's all you're caring about. So if all you care about is plus or minus 5,
yeah,
that makes the decision
Yeah.
pretty easy compared to look at yards again. Look at
okay.
the yards again.
Yeah. Let me look. Yeah. So if
So
you
we
look
go
at the
back to
yard,
yards.
yeah, here we go.
So the yards are a difference of 61
Yeah.
in the medians. That's pretty large. I mean, you're talking a difference of about 7% versus the Vegas. So it's 7%
It's
versus
a little bit
almost
more loose.
nil.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a 300 spread versus
Whatever.
basically 500,
450.
480.
Yeah. Something
Yeah,
like that.
490, I
Or
guess,
whatever it
between
is.
the top and bottom of reality versus the top and bottom of forecast for the following year. It contracts by, I mean, it's literally it's almost half the size.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to see how Vegas is looking at the wide receiver position, because they're saying a good season for a wide receiver, 850 and 5.
There's you another poll number.
850 and 5. If you go ahead and say, would you be happy?
Yeah. 850 and 5.
850 and 5 wide receiver. Would you be happy? I'm guessing that 85, maybe 80% of people would say, no, I hate that. I don't want that.
But I'm an above average driver, Dennis.
But
yeah. George Carlin there.
So if I can find two wide receivers that finish above 805, I'm going to win my fantasy football leagues. If I can have two wide receivers above the median, and I could have two running backs again above the median, I could have a wide receiver, a quarterback, and a tight end. If I can have above median in all of those 6 starting positions, don't care about the flex. If I'm above the median in those 6 positions, I'm cashing lots of checks this year. And as we've seen, it's not too hard when you diagnose the ADP to figure out how to get to those 6. That's the intriguing part of this whole game right here, is I can get to that 6. I can get to 6 above median, 6 of my 7 starters above median, just based on smart use of ADP. That's making the game a lot easier.
Yeah. It's very tricky.
And all I got to do is have the roster build that alleviates injury concerns, and then I'm in good shape. But those bars are set incredibly low.
Yeah. Here's tight ends, Dennis, since I don't know, I feel a little energetic. You inspired me. Here's tight ends, and notice their bottom is below reality a little bit on this one. You see?
Interesting.
And the touchdowns are broader. It's like 4.5. It's a little bit, the box is a little bit aggressive.
So they got reality. They got a 2 touchdown spread instead of a 1 touchdown spread.
Yes. And
the yardage is much broader. I mean, we're talking 275 yards top to bottom.
If I was going to bet touchdown props, would I be looking at tight end? You see, I'm trying to equate this kind of information to overall, where should I fish, right, Dennis? We're showing 4 ponds to fish in: QB, RB, tight end, WR. Where do I fish? Just without looking at any players, right? Just at this level, top down, which I recommend people think about. You see, that's what I've got to try to learn a little bit. And it's not intuitive yet because of this, but it's very interesting how Vegas sees the WRs versus the tight ends on touchdowns.
On the player level,
okay.
What are they saying for Kelsey's touchdown prop?
6.5, Dennis. That seems low.
Seems low, but Greatest tight end in the game, right? No
In a
question.
I
Might
mean,
might
you're
be the
looking Shockey. You're talking some ancient that guys that probably didn't get as much opportunities as
so
Kelsey. Yeah.
so he's basically had
Gonzalez maybe is
last
another one.
last 7 years,
Yeah.
Professor.
Okay. Okay. Not
He's
ancient. Okay.
last 7 years.
Yes. Yes. The answer is
So
yes.
he's been above that.
I don't hold
I've
against him. He's a KC guy.
been above it 5 times,
Yeah.
been below it 2 times.
Yeah.
Last 7 years.
Yeah. 6.5.
When he was below, he was at 5 both seasons. Every other season has been 8 or more touchdowns. I love that prop of 6.5. The
Yeah.
900 yards, not so much. That's a lot of yards for a tight end. But he's actually been better he's been more consistent on the yards. He beat 900 last year in a partial season.
The box, the highest 1020 last year.
Yep.
Highest 411, floor ceiling.
Whew.
The box 887. So taking 900, Dennis, is taking the top of their prop, which is still above
Wow.
the box. So it seems like that's something I don't want to mess with. Right?
But he's been above 980 yards each of the last 8 seasons. And even his worst 2 seasons, he was 875 and 862. So, boy, they're setting that bar high for Kelsey. But if he plays 16 games, he should make that. That's scary how much he is the unicorn in fantasy football, but they're giving Laporta
another
spot.
touchdown. Yeah. The touchdown.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah.
And you have only one data point for Laporta last year.
Yeah.
Rookie season. You got one data point to go on. He had 10 touchdowns.
Yep.
So do you bet on him to equal last year, or he's got it? Boy, that's a tough bet. I would rather have Kelsey at 6.5 than Laporta at 7.5.
Yeah.
And Laporta last year, despite playing every game, 889 yards. So he did not beat that number by much. I'd like the under on that because of injury potential. But boy, those are interesting marks that they've set. But it shows that according to Vegas, those are the 2 guys that stand out.
Yep. And Andrews is kind of right there, but a little bit below.
And I'll take that discount because the discount in ADP is huge.
It's definitely around.
Yeah. Very interesting data, Professor. I cannot wait to factor this into the game plan.
Yeah, so next week, Dennis, I'm just going to show just the positional ranks by Vegas, and we'll compare to our metrics and the publics, and so we'll have more to compare. We'll have a free for all on looking at differences, and I think we'll have a good time doing that. That will send us right into the expo, and whatever we're going to do there. I don't know if we're going to take notes or whatever. Probably should take notes. I don't know if they'll let you video some of those shows or whatever they're going to have. Next year, you need to be on here, Dennis. I'll prop you up with lots of data, right? Put a teleprompter there, give you a little ice cream, get you ready to go, prop you up there, get you up there, Papaw, and let you go. Make us world famous.
That would be interesting. That I get to be the mouthpiece for the
Oh,
professional
definitely.
data.
Yeah, no, I'm behind the curtain. That's your I have done 30 years of lecturing in front of students. I've about had my fun, but you know, look, if they want to drop some swag or some cash or something, okay. Professor and go. I can look. I can, you know, when Johnny Carson would bomb, he could dance. I'm just saying, if I went too much over, too many boxes and whiskers, I could do a little tap dance or something. Only old folks would know when Johnny Carson would have a bad night in his jokes. He'd have to tap dance, and everybody, had to do something because his jokes and the public, they'd take about 3 or 4 jokes, and all of a sudden, none of them were working, and Carson was, ooh, this is bad, you know. So used to love Johnny Carson
Oh
back
yeah.
when it wasn't a political free for all. That regardless of your politics, it just wasn't. I mean, Johnny Carson
Oh,
was great.
Johnny Carson ripped both sides of the
Oh,
aisle,
he did,
and with equal enjoyment
and I
because he was.
loved his take on Billy Carter. You remember
Oh
the
yes.
Jimmy is an angel sweetheart, but his brother, we all got the black sheep, was old Billy Carter. Billy Beer, Dennis. Did you ever know he had his own beer for a
Oh
while?
yeah,
Yeah, a
yeah,
friend of mine's got a 6 pack of it. I don't know if he thinks it's going to be valuable, but Billy Beer
and
is a
and
big thing.
filmed taking a bit of a relief break
Oh, definitely.
right on the tarmac
Hey, you
out
got to
at Andrews
go,
Air Force Base.
Dennis. Oh, Georgia boys got to go. Ain't no cornfield to pee in.
Oh,
You got to
oh
go.
my goodness. All
Okay.
right, Professor.
Okay.
Getting back on the fantasy
Yeah.
football
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Coming this week, folks, the updated version of my better than zero strategy for redraft. So that is coming out. The arm is working again. I can actually type. So
Nice.
that is coming out. Probably will be ready for the editor
Yeah.
to play with that by Monday morning. So head on over to the scienceoffantasyfootball.com. The professor's got a lot of cool data. He's got a lot of great lesson plans for you as well. Read up on our methodology in all of our articles, and also look at some of the professor's lesson plans on each and every and the videos of our podcast. And of course, head on back here next week for another edition of the Science of Fantasy Football.
Get to work, folks.